guys direct?
That's a hard question.
Yeah.
I think I don't know how to do anything else. I mean, I really don't. I mean, I direct because I started when I was young, and it was the most effective way of dealing with things I was thinking, of trying to deal with, translating problems from real life into a form that I could manage. And so directing just became the thing that I could do. I mean, it's making movies, it's writing them, it's directing them, it's working with other people, it's the whole process. Like, the idea of being a director for hire is like a fun thing to do, but being a director for me means something much bigger and much, it means everything. It means writing, means editing, means working with people and that whole process, because that's what it's really about.
Right. And so to work stuff out, though, initially you wanted to work out some of your own
Then my
stuff.
first film was Puberty, when I was 13.
Okay.
That was me dealing with puberty.
Was it called Puberty?
It was called Puberty.
And that was the first thing you directed?
It was the first thing I directed, yeah.
Okay. And Alex, how about you? Because you act, obviously, as well.
Yeah.
And you started directing first before you got into acting, or?
Yeah, I directed. I mean, I came to it very late in the game. I made my first movie when I was 27, and that was the first thing I acted in as well. But to answer your question, I find it fun. You know, it's kind of one of the first, not one of the first, but one of the things that I stumbled into that I thought was fun and could sort of keep giving at least for a little bit of time. And also kind of echoing what Rai said, there's so many different phases of it. Like, there's a solitary phase when you write, usually, then it's a very hyper-collaborative phase, and then you can kind of get solitary again, maybe slightly less solitary with your editor. And I like that variety and versatility to it, which keeps it fun. I think if I was just writing, I'd lose my mind. Just the loneliness of it would be paralyzing, for me personally, based on my temperament. So the fact that it has this texture and variety.
And what was the thing that said to you, oh, I want to do that? You know, not necessarily, or maybe, a film or a filmmaker, but what made you say, oh, I want to kind of put my entire idea into something and mounting the entire thing and leading the way and all that responsibility?
I don't know if I ever had this sort of crystallized singular eureka moment.
Right.
So I don't know if I could answer snapshot. So I was doing like theater stuff and stand-up comedy, and it just felt very, I wasn't great at it to begin with, and secondly, it felt very disposable and ephemeral, and I felt it'd just be nice, maybe to romanticize it. Maybe there's some sort of existential fear of mortality or something, but I did want something that was more concrete and could just, this is your movie, it's flawed, but it's a reflection of who I was when I was 27.
I had this moment though when I had just finished making my first film, and it wasn't about, oh, I want to direct, it was, oh, I want to make a movie. And I didn't even know what that was until I kind of been through it and made a very small movie. And I was literally driving the crew van with a bunch of people in the back after, I think our last day of shooting, and I was like, this is so difficult and hard, but I kind of love it, and it's sort of really rewarding, and I feel like I survived in this way. Like, I made it through, and I'm fully alive and human. And it was like this rush, kind of, that I think that made me feel like, oh, this is sort of what, I love this. Like, I feel truly alive, and I want to do this again.
Right. And it's that thing, just talking about the friends and the stuff like that, where it's like, it's a weirdly crystallizing, like, a week of working with people, or like a whole movie, usually like a month or 6 weeks of being around people, can feel like a year of time. It's like going to camp, totally. That's why it's fun. It's fun because it's like a lot of focus. Like, it's a lot of people like focusing all in one direction, and so you kind of don't have a life outside of the bubble for that time period, and can be a fun thing.
So Antonio, you said you did your first one at 13. Was there...
I did mine when I was 5.
I did mine in the womb. The first one in the womb.
So was there, what got you into movies to begin with?
I was really, my parents would always take me to the movies from when I was really young. It was the one thing in my family that we could all talk about when we were all together. And at first I was really obsessed with the things that people did in movies. Like, I really was obsessed with the idea of being an archaeologist because of Indiana Jones, and then the idea of chasing ghosts because of Ghostbusters. I mean, it was like I would fantasize that these things were real and that or they were the way that they were in the movie was real, and I could do that. And then I realized they weren't real, and what's exciting about it is making that up. And then I saw this ad for New York Film Academy, and I said to my brother, my older brother, I was like, I'm going to do that. And my brother said, no, you're not. You're full of shit. And then I was like, no, now I'm going to do it for real because you told me I couldn't. And I lied by my age, and I went to the New York Film Academy right here at on 16th or whatever, 17th.
Is there one film or filmmaker that
it was Clockwork Orange really changed my life.
Orange.
Yeah. Clockwork Orange really did it for me.
Right.
So I was 12 when I saw that, and I had just seen Trainspotting, and it said the Clockwork Orange of this generation, and I had to find this movie, and I saw it, and it was right before school started for the next semester, next year, and I was like, whatever this guy did, whoever this guy's Kubrick is, that's what a director is. And I was like, that guy for some reason, I knew that guy was like, that guy made every decision in this movie. And I got to figure out how to do that.
Right.
And make, like, the feeling that I felt at the end of that movie is like, I got to figure out how to feel that again.
All right. Craig, how about you? Is there one film or filmmaker that kind of influences you?
That influences?
Kind of changes over time, like maybe when you're a kid or somebody, but right now.
What I was remembering was when I was in the 7th grade, I met my friend Matt Chapman, who ended up doing Homestar Runner. He's the voice of the web cartoon series Homestar Runner, and he and I, like, he was this cool dude who like had a video camera. I mean, it was still had a thing like with the cable and the other thing, but he would always make these like cool, movies where they would run through the woods with a gun. And like he let me like go be in a few of them, but that was totally like what I think. He opened my eyes to be like, oh, and then he was like, no, there's this cool guy. His name is David Lynch, and then I got to see like whatever was right as like Twin Peaks started, and I was like, oh, you can be like him.
How about you guys? Is there a filmmaker or one film that kind of set you off?
No, I mean, no, there wasn't like one definitive film or like film experience at a theater that set me off. But when I was in my mid-20s, I saw Sherman's March by Ross McElwee, and I loved that movie, and I don't think I'd seen or hadn't seen a lot of sort of these first-person documentaries, which is probably my least favorite genre. Most of the movies are awful, but this one I really responded to because I like him. I thought he was really funny and honest and smart and perceptive, and you can make a movie with just your camera. And not coming from film school or not knowing anything about packaging or financing, there was something sort of liberating, I guess, about that. Like, oh, this guy can actually make something very moving, funny, and also has longevity. I mean, I saw it 20 years after it was made or whatever. I was like, wow, this is still very funny and relevant. So that was a nice moment, and I aped several scenes of it in my first movie, directly airlifting and putting in my movie. Yeah.
Remind me of him. I want to see that.
How about you, Ray?
I mean, I think I was into photography and a little bit of into acting, and then I started getting into film. But and then it was kind of like a renaissance when I discovered like a lot of directors, and I had a friend who was an Iranian filmmaker named Amir Naderi, who sort of showed me a bunch of these movies all together and was like, watch Godard's films in consecutive order. And like, Antonioni and Bergman was like huge for me. Bergman was kind of a revelation, I think, in part because they were so simple, actually. It was sometimes two people sitting at a table talking for what felt like a very long time, but I was just completely riveted and on the edge of my seat by like the emotions being so taut of the film. Like between the two people, it was like, this is a mother and a daughter having a conversation, and I'm like, what are you gonna say? Like just this series of revelations, and that was both inspiring and sort of blew my mind in a way of what I had grown up with was very different from that. So, I still find myself ripping Bergman shots all the time.
Everybody.
What do you guys think is the most inaccurate cliche about directors?
That we have megaphones? I guess that's not always true. I've just never worked out that.
Sitting about filmmaking, though, it's about like people underestimate the collaborative effort, though, and that is really the thing about it, is that it's like a team of people that are working together, and it's like it takes a village, and that's really true. And sometimes I think the idea that like the director is like the person who is all, it's like you're creatively guiding and all of that, but everybody you can't do everything.
Yeah.
So that's
I always get frustrated when when people talk about directing, they're like, I knew exactly what that was going to look like. I just knew exactly what was going to be there, and it's going to, like, I came in, I knew where the shot was. It was like, it's like the best you can get is like a hazy, it's like an image behind a cloud, and you're trying to get to that image. No one knows exactly what it is. It's just like you have like an idea, and you're trying to convey that idea, and then it's a very weird process, because then someone says something and then that becomes part of the idea, or someone has a suggestion and then it's like the idea evolves in an organic way, and then you don't remember. It was almost like you had a feeling and then you're trying to get to that feeling again. But it's like that when people say, I just knew everything, like, and then other like young filmmakers come in like, man, I want to be like that guy who knows everything. But you're never going to be like that guy, because that guy doesn't exist.
Right.
It's impossible. It's part of the beauty of this thing is that it isn't just you. It's this group of people that come together, and there's this amazing energy
and it's like
chemistry.
the location. It's like,
Well,
I thought the walls were.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Or that thing where I remember I used to like, definitely for maybe the first like 2 scenes of like Great World of Sound, like I'd try to draw storyboards, and then you like get there and you're like the person's shorter and like you can't put the camera there, you know what I mean? You're just like, I can't do that storyboard. Like,
I still do feel like storyboards are helpful to have an idea. It's helpful to try to clarify your ideas in advance, but then it is that throwing out process of like, that's not gonna happen.
But I like shot list to digital storyboards. Like I found that shot list as like a way of getting your ideas out, and then going, like figuring out your locations, and then going to the location before you shoot with the camera, with the DP, and being like this. So then, because that makes sense to me. So then you're not wasting your time figuring out things that you don't know yet.
Josh was talking about that in the last.
Yeah, we started that process on Afterschool, and we started to always try and do that.
Is there a filmmaker whose career that you guys maybe would kind of model your own career after, that you kind of look at how they have conducted their career over the course of 15, 20 years and go, I want a career like that?
There's directors I have respect for that usually it's about versatility. Directors that seem like they can do very different movies and kind of go between different kinds of genres, but it always feels still theirs in some way.
Anybody in particular?
I've liked Steven Soderbergh at times. I've really respected his career.
He's the guy.
Yeah, he bounces around, and every movie is completely him, but he's doing very, very different films.
Right. He's not
budget
like
levels
doing a Steven Soderbergh film type thing.
Exactly.
Like, it's like he's just letting it be whatever
Well,
it
that
is.
kind of jumps ahead a little bit to what I was going to talk about later about whether or not the auteur theory is kind of an outdated or at least unrealistic idea nowadays. Whether or not, in a way, this is kind of a barbershop conversation. Like we can debate over, what you like, your own kind of personal feelings. But you look at a career like Wes Anderson, who I point to him because he's so specific, like what he does. He does it so well. But I have to admit, as a fan, I'm kind of like, what else you got? It'd be awesome to see him do like a horror movie, or like just totally do something. Like Aronofsky, one of the most brilliant things he did was he took this awesome like hip hop style editing that he did with Pi and Requiem, and then he just dumped it and went off to do The Wrestler and Black Swan. It just showed this amazing range,
Into the foundation of it.
And even when
But
the problem is like, even if that movie he was swinging for the fence. I don't know if he got there, but it was like he was trying things.
There's a genius failure in a way.
No, I totally agree. That's what I think filmmakers always need to do is like, you have to go swing for the, you always have to go there. But I do think that the auteur theory wasn't born out of, very specific filmmakers, but it was born out of filmmakers that were working within an industry, within a system, and still somehow finding a way of having their personalities come through. I mean, you have all these guys like Anthony Mann and Bud Whitaker, all these guys in the 50s, Ford, Houston, Hawks. They're making studio movies. Those auteurs, they're different. There's they're working within a studio system. They're they're working with other people's scripts for the most part. They're going from studio project to studio project, and some of them obviously had more control than others. But it was more of like an essence or something that came across, even within a system that they could come through. And I feel like that's still there, but I feel like being on tour now is much more about your trademarks, your like these quintessential shots, or
Your brand.
Your brand, yeah. And I think that there is a difference between that and it becomes then harder maybe to jump from genre to genre, into.
You think directors need a brand to really stand out?
I think
particularly nowadays.
They've pushed this idea. I don't think you need. I mean, going back to Soderbergh. Soderbergh, he does, or Fincher even. Those guys can jump.
Or like Winterbottom. Like who else does that kind of stuff?
Jumping?
Coen Brothers at this point really jump a lot.
Ang Lee,
Ang
Sense
Lee,
and
sure.
Sensibility and The Hulk.
Yeah.
And Brokeback.
I think I agree with what you said, where there are times where you see a filmmaker who's become so specific, and it's almost like they're becoming more and more specific as they go along.
Right.
And it gets kind of boring. You want something new. You want them to challenge something. Like a Bruno Dumont, for example, a French director. I want to see Bruno Dumont make a comedy.
Right.
Bruno Dumont makes just very heavy, dark, philosophical films. It's very in the Dardenne brothers too. They sort of stick to something that's great. It's always great, but you almost just say, just mess up once.
Yeah.
Just go and make a big mistake with something that then leads you or opens you up to something else. Because I think that's the other thing, is that being a filmmaker is you grow, you change. It's like you.
I remember being in the theater when Match Point. There was a trailer for Match Point came up, and it was like it was like edited very like different than any Woody Allen movie. Like very sexy, sleek, romantic kind of thriller. Beautiful people, and
Didn't
deception.
put his name on it.
No, at the very end of the trailer, it said a film by Woody Allen,
No.
and there was literally a gasp in the audience. Everyone was just like, "Wow!" And it was exciting to see. Oh, this is going to be something maybe a little different. How do you guys define success for one of your films?
I think Alex gets to go.
Success on that comes. Well, getting it off the hard drive is the first sign of success. A festival was kind enough to show it, and for me that's a success, because sometimes you have to wait a long time for that to happen.
Getting into a particular festival,
Well,
or one of the top?
a nice festival like Sundance or South by Southwest or
Right.
Tribeca. A festival people will see your movie. That's a success. At least for me, that's a success. Then on top of that, if you can get a small label to release your movie and show it to people outside of this festival experience, that's a huge success.
Right.
For me, those are the two immediate benchmarks of success. Outside of the creative stuff where you may or may not have finishing a movie, like getting this Herculean thing across the finish line, even if it means dragging the corpse across it at the end in tatters, this is a huge success.
Right.
Many stages of success.
Right. How about you?
Well done.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's in being so involved in the process, entrenched is a better word, you have to constantly remind yourself of those successes. You have to be like, yes, I finished it, now take a moment to, this is me talking personally, like I take a moment to appreciate that and not just obsess over the next step of like, where's it going to premiere, which festival, and all that stuff.
Right.
And so try to like, the sound design, okay, we finished it, it's great, it's whole, it does what we want it to do. Like that's, everything is a series of small triumphs. And
So personal satisfaction is maybe the first kind of barometer of success.
that's
Looking at it
finishing.
and saying, this is what
getting
I
it
tried
made.
to do.
First, getting it made. Walking onto set the first day and being like, "Oh, everybody's here and we're making a movie." That's a huge success. I agree. There's a lot of things to celebrate when you're making a movie.
Craig? Would you
All of
concur,
that.
or?
Yeah, for me, like, I realized after, I remember forever, like, I had a very specific definition of, like, I'm going to one day direct a movie. And then that happened. And then I was like, no, what I meant was I'm going to direct a movie and then it's going to go to Sundance. If that happens, then it'll be the top of the mountain.
Right.
And then that happened, and then it was like, no, wait, it needs to actually like get bought by a distributor.
Right.
And then that happened, and it's like, at the end of that process, I was so kind of hollowed out by all of that and
Right.
like really like crashed and
Mhm.
was like very depressed for a while because I had sort of put that as the like thing that I was doing.
Is it because you didn't realize there would be a new benchmark every time, or was it
Yeah,
because
partly.
you found yourself becoming overly ambitious and maybe you weren't comfortable with it? You know, is there a feeling
No.
like I want to get into Sundance, then you get into Sundance and you're like I want to win, you know, and then it's like once you win, it's like yeah, but I want X amount of dollars to. For my,
I
you know
think
what I mean?
I
Like
just was like kind of vague and hadn't really like thought about doing it as like a life job thing
Right.
in a real way. It was like so specific towards like making this one project that like at the end of it, it was sort of like a weird hollowing out feeling where I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and it took me a while to like kind of recognize like to not try to define it success anymore that way, that was not, at least for me, just not a healthy way to try to do stuff.
Right.
And I mean, of course, I'm excited to try to get your movie finished, financed, finished, bought, all of that stuff. But it's like, I don't know. It seems real dangerous. Or for me, it seems real dangerous to like think about it.
well, I think to be super specific could be dangerous. Like if you say I want to get into Sundance, that's my barometer, and then you don't.
yeah, it wrecks
That's
you.
just like a drag.
But
you
a
know?
lot of people, that's
If
like,
you do, then what?
well,
You
that's
know,
I
that
think
is
was
like-
what
But I think
Like,
it's that
even if you-
we break it up too much. I think it's more just like I think it's really is that we just want we want to finish a film and we want people to go see it. I mean that's basically how it is. I think at some point you start once you've gotten to Sundance, once you've gotten these like a festival that you like and you've gotten the film scene, it's like you realize, you know what, it's the festivals are great and all this is great, but at the end of the day, it's just people seeing the movie and like. However you get to that place of just people seeing the movie, that's
Well, I'm glad
That's-
you said that because that
that's-
kind of leads into one of my next questions, which was a bit of a Debbie Downer question, but yeah, getting into Sundance, getting into Cannes, and all of you guys have had success, but is there ever a feeling kind of like when it's done, almost like kind of a day after Christmas blues, you know, where it's like, oh shit, okay, I just went there, it was awesome, but now what? And when you look at some older filmmakers, like older, Darren Aronofsky, Paul Thomas Anderson, they're still struggling to get their movies made. Like 15 years in, all this success, masterpiece films on their resume, and they still have, like, Black Swan was like, they had such a ridiculously hard time getting that made. And even The Master, stories about struggling to get it made. Does it ever just kind of like bum you out? Just knowing, like, you know, if I want to do this my way for the next 30 years, it's going to be a grind, and I have to just suck it up and kind of go that route.
I feel like you're reminded of that every day. No, but I feel like you're reminded of that every day when you're trying to make movies. I mean,
What that does for me, what I try to do with that is like, well, I have to be I really have to care about what I'm making. Like I have to completely believe that what I'm making belongs in the world and is gonna spend people are, you know, that I'm so interested in whatever I'm doing that other people are gonna care. And I think that that's almost, it can become a good thing because I know that I'm not going to put all my energy into something because it is so hard to even get a movie made that I'm not going to like give something my all unless it's really important. So there's this like, again, kind of like survivalist automatic prioritization that happens to me based on the pure like financials of the medium.
How do you pick your projects? Do you think of your filmography when you?
you know, in part, like, in some ways, like, there's, like, some level of, like, making stuff that's, like, you don't get to do Steven Soderbergh stuff until, I mean, he had to do, like, Schizopolis and Underneath and, like, really sweat it out for a little while. But then, like, if you read, there's, like, some awesome transcription of, like, him talking with George Clooney at, like, right around the time that Solaris came out. And he, like, they bring up, like, Out of Sight, and they're like, he's just like, well, that was me just basically feeling like I had this whole side of the like industry that was cut off to me, and I wanted to get out of the indie film ghetto, and so that was why I really wanted to make that movie, like, which is like totally makes sense to me, because it feels ambitious, and like, I mean, it's my favorite movie of his, I think.
It's honest too. It's refreshingly honest to say that, you know, to come out and be like, yeah, you know, like I want to kind of try to get into that, you know, and not be stuck in the
Art
kind
films.
of, yeah.
But I think the filmography question is interesting, especially I think every time Tarantino has a film, we're always reminded of this because Tarantino's so obsessed
Well,
with
he
the
was
idea
just
of-
talking about that.
He's
with
obsessed with
filmography.
the idea of filmography. Something interesting about that. But then there's like the Woody Allen approach, which is like, just do as much shit as possible, and some of it'll be
We've got
great.
a couple
some-
masterpieces eventually will have to rise to the top.
So,
If
Woody
you do
Allen's-
50 films.
I feel like that's the Werner Herzog thing, where it's just like, keep working.
Yeah, you're gonna die if you stop.
Yeah. That's like more about him, I think, than a filmography or.
I think career-wise, like somewhere between for me is like Fassbender and Kubrick.
Right.
Somewhere between those two is where I feel like I'd be happy.
And how do you guys feel about the state of indie film right now? All of it, the aesthetic, the business side of it.
I think it's, I don't know. I think it's gonna be okay.
Do you think we'll ever be able to rebound to the powerhouse of the 90s that it was, where it was so part of it?
Sorry, that sounds awful, but it's true. Like, I don't know. I mean, it was like there was the 90s, and now there's a new decade. People are watching movies in different ways. That's cool, but it's also in a crisis, but we'll get through the crisis.
Yeah, I think we always get through it. It's like, film's not gonna go anywhere. It's gonna change, and the way people consume it's gonna change. But I think it's really interesting that you look at like all these films, Django, Lincoln, Silver Linings Playbook. These films are pretty dark movies in a lot of ways. I mean, yes, there's Hollywood elements to them, and they function that way. But I think that there is something very hopeful. Zero Dark 30, or it's like
Right.
these films. There's something hopeful about these kind of movies getting the kind of attention that they're getting, critically and commercially. And I think that I think people are going to go see movies, and we're going to keep making movies, and we'll figure out how to deal with that. But I feel like anybody who we've seen who's like, this is going to be, the internet's the future, and we're going to just release our films on the internet, and then doesn't really take off. And
I know,
then
people have been talking
like
about
Soderbergh's
this
like,
for
I'm going to release
years.
both at the same time, and it's going to be groundbreaking, and then nothing really happens. Like
Right.
sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And it's like,
And there's just so much more media, just in general, out
Yep.
there. So many more distractions.
I feel like in the 40s, people were like, oh, then there's like TVs and
so we need 3D. We need 3D. We need
We've
drive-throughs.
just been going through this, it's always like a measure of like a society feeling like kind of ahead of itself, no matter how, throughout history. And this is our current moment of that.
How much do you guys think about indie trends when you're making a film, and
Yeah.
kind of working against the trend? There's the kind of heightened style, over-the-top style of the 90s, and then there's a kind of direct reaction to that with kind of neo-realism. In music, it's a little bit more easy to identify. 80s kind of poppy stuff, and then the very next thing was kind of the grunge thing, and then the very next thing after that was the boy band thing. Everything kind of reacts to what was kind of previously happening. I remember reading something, I think in Filmmaker actually, where you talked about getting ready to do compliance, and you were going through a period where you were getting frustrated at all the kind of lo-fi kind of relationship movies that were like, they were just overwhelming
Right.
the market. And you were like, I'm sick of kind of what's out there right now. And you had a couple of projects after A Great World of Sound that didn't really kind of come together, so you just sat down and you wrote Compliance.
It kind of went like that. Like, I was kind of tired of like the handheld movie with like two people hugging on the poster.
Right.
Definitely. I was like, I don't want to see I don't want to see that movie
you know, two
anymore.
people doing other things.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And so
I
you,
guess I was like, I was like, why? I mean, essentially, it was like, it's funny. Me and I remember specifically like me and another filmmaker, Amy Simets, like sitting together drinking one night and being like, let's make genre movies. Like, I want to make a thriller. Like,
Right.
why does it gotta be like a pan-holy relationship movie?
Right.
Like, you can do that. You can do a thriller just as good with $4 as you can.
and it was in your head though, that because that's what was popular, those types of films. So it was like, why does it have to be that? We can do something different.
It wasn't that it was in my head that it was popular. It was just what was around. Like, I was just seeing that a lot and kind of finding my patience like
Right.
a little pushed or something.
Or maybe even the reverse of it. There's a lot of stuff that's too mushy or relationship driven, and it's saturated, too many people doing stuff like that, so maybe it's a reaction to do something.
Exactly.
That was
Different.
totally what it was.
Yeah, I remember reading Lena Dunham was talking about how with Tiny Furniture, she was saying that so many films were like being handheld at that time that she wanted to do hers on sticks just to kind of have it a little bit different, you know, and not kind of look the same as so many of those other types of films.
And I'm going to devote more than like 4 seconds of thought to how we light it, you know, and actually make it look
Yep.
a comedy
Like
that
a
actually,
movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
a movie.
No.
As novel an idea as that.
No.
But yeah, I don't think it would have been as successful as it was if it were handheld and if the intention to framing and lighting wasn't what it was. Yeah.
And I think a lot of those relationship movies also came out of a reaction to sort of more violent films that weren't being seen at, you know, that were very popular at the time. And I think that sort of, I think we're always like responding to what happened earlier. It's an evolution.
Wait, can I do something for a second?
Hair, can we?
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
So let's talk about process a little bit. Do you guys rehearse?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're able to rehearse? Your actors are.
On the day, I mean, I don't tend to do lots of like, I don't do like weeks of rehearsal before, but more so that on, we'll get together, people get to know each other, and it'll be like a nice energy, get sort of like, we'll go to meal, or like we'll sit and we'll meet, we'll talk about the work, and then we'll have a meal and hang out. And then on the day, we'll schedule it so that we have a lot of time to work things out and rehearse and play and find it.
So you build it into the schedule.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, I think the way I like to do things is I like to do a period where there's a lot of talking between me and the actor, and there's kind of like, maybe there's like one long email where I give a lot of sort of backstory, and then let them go and work on it. That's if they're good and they're diligent actors and they work and they spend time with it. And then maybe a day or two before shooting starts that we can work together and be together and then get a group of us together and just spend time together. And then on the day, spend time finding it, rehearsing it, changing lines if we need to change lines, shoot, stop, think, you know. I feel like I still don't quite know what I'd do if I had like 2 weeks rehearsal on something. I like the sort of immediacy of finding it, really finding it on the day.
Yeah. How about you?
Well, it depends, but I try to shoot chronologically as much as I can, as much as the situations will allow me, and if we pull that off and we are shooting more or less chronologically, I think it's important, and I try to rehearse the first third of the scenes, or the first quarter of the scenes, just to make sure the actors kind of doing what I'm hoping they're doing and that they're comfortable with each other. And then I feel like if that's in a good groove, then like I'm less terrified about rehearsing stuff in the middle of the movie or at the end of the movie. Hopefully like we're all on the same page, we're calibrated, and then I kind of, if we have time, sure, let's take advantage of it. If lunch, we have an extra half an hour of lunch, let's go somewhere and walk through it. But it's only the first third or quarter that I'm really feel like we have to do. And if we don't do it, things might spew out of control. But then again, you don't always shoot chronologically, but that's always something I strive to do.
Right.
If we can, if locations and everything else and schedules allow.
Did you have a firm script for Red Flag, or was it like a treatment?
No, Red Flag was an outline. Most of my movies are outlines. So it was like it was like a script without any dialogue, just sort of like descriptions of the scenes. So that's what we shot off.
And how long was it?
It's like 30 pages. You know, it was like a paragraph description of every scene, and we had like 55 scenes or something. Based on interviews that I read, that's how Larry David does Curb, and that's how Rick Alberson, based on Q&As, did the comedy. I don't know how people get funding for stuff like that, unless you're like a real...
We did Simon without a script, 8-page outline.
And you got funding for it. How did that work? They must have had a tremendous amount of faith.
Yeah, and it was, well, I had done one feature before, so I had shown that I could make a film, and we spent a lot of time talking about it, and the investor that brought in money, who's also a producer on the film, he came in at the very end of Martha, so he had seen us be able to make Martha, and then it was like, well, come in for Martha and come in for this crazy idea that we're doing in Paris, and he was gung ho about it, and then, and so in that case, I had an 8-page outline, and then I would write a couple scenes. There were some scenes that I wrote before shooting, and then other scenes I would write in like a notebook, and then just show up on set with. Like, we have a schedule based on the outline, so we made a whole schedule based on this 8-page outline, and then then it was just
That's
this,
ridiculous.
yeah. So I would know. Okay, so I have like 3 days at the apartment. So what else besides what I have scripted can I get at the apartment? And what other scenes do we have that I could fit in some? I mean, it was like a jigsaw puzzle, but it was a really exciting process to work without a script, and then to.
So you never had a script? You were always working off that 8-page document?
I was working off an 8-page outline, and then I was there were like maybe there was some more elaborate scenes that I outlined that I wrote a script for. Some scenes where we'd rehearse beforehand, improvise, and then write a scene. And other scenes where I'd just come in and I'd be like, "Listen, are you comfortable doing this kind of sex scene today?" And luckily they were French, so they'd be like, "Yeah, sure." But that was the loosest I've ever been about something. But it was trying to just using improv as a way in to make something really formal, which was a really difficult process.
Would you want to make the next movie off an outline as well?
No, it was really exhausting. I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep at all.
That would freak me out, I think. I mean, simply just because, like, I really don't like the feeling of, like, being on set and having everybody be like, well, how do we make
But you
it
get
good?
used to that. Listen, that was a great
I really
thing.
didn't like that.
I didn't like that either at first, and then I was like, listen, I know by take 3, they're gonna be fine. Like, but I have to get through like three takes of people just kind of like, the fuck is this guy? What does he think he's doing? And then by take 3, like, oh, okay, I'm so sorry.
But to me, also partly like I do like the, like, rehearsal is now turned into, for me, as much of what you're saying, where it's like make sure that they're not going in a direction that you can't see, but also just like how much do they want? Because a lot of times, like, the actors want it's a scary thing to do, you know, and so it's like as much rehearsal as like is necessary to make that not be the first 2 takes being that like, what am I trying to do? Like, you know, like, I don't know. And sometimes you find out that they don't want any, which has been something I would have not, you know, in like film school, I would have never been like, no, we have to rehearse like everything. But I don't think you necessarily do. It's like you're saying, especially like as you're making the movie, like you eventually look at each other and they're like, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
And there's some argument if you had 2 weeks with somebody beforehand and you like you feel like that's too much time. Just hanging out with them for 2 weeks is not a waste of time.
No, it's not a waste of time. No, it's not, and you can probably get something good out of it.
For sure. And watching movies with them, and you know, just really rapping about other things you guys like.
What would you think from the conception all the way up to release is the single, if you had to pick one area of the entire thing, that's the single most important thing to get right?
To get right. Editing, I would say. I would feel like giving yourself enough time, for me. Because that's when it's like, I mean, you can redo things and move things and change things and figure, even if you're not like reshooting stuff, which I haven't really ever had the money or opportunity to do, but I feel like having enough time to like play with it is good.
I would love to, Woody Allen, I heard, always budgets in a reshoot. Like that, I just feel like that's such a good idea. I love the idea of being able to go back and reshoot things, because it's such a, or taking like, or being able to have the luxury of like shooting for a month, taking 3 weeks off, and then shooting again. I mean, that's such a, that would be
Have
great.
some clarity on it.
That'd be great.
That's my last
You
2 movies. Well, I every time I try to write an ending, it changes when we shoot and then edit the movie, which is more of a testament to my shortcomings as a man who can finish a story. So I always, though not always, the last 2.5 movies, 2 movies, I've stopped even trying to shoot the ending in principle, and just go off and edit with my editor for a few months and then come back and shoot. You know, but you have to be lucky that everyone's going to be around.
Right.
People aren't going to shave their heads.
But do you give everybody that heads up? Do you say?
Yeah, in the last 2 movies I have. And I'm also, you know, it's going to be probably just me acting in it, so I can rely on myself to not
Do you ever
shave my head.
do you ever do multiple endings and just see which one plays better?
I've shot multiple endings, but not in. I mean, only because I thought this is the one, and then like we test it and people don't like it, and I stopped liking it.
We did that with You Won't Miss Me too, where we would shoot for like a week. Part of it was just a budgetary kind of necessity of like raising money for a 1 week shoot, then going and editing the film, and then writing more, and then continuing to, and then shooting, raising the money, and then editing. But by the time I finished shooting, I had a rough cut of the film that was an hour and a half long or whatever. So, and I found that call and response process was really helpful in helping me to kind of understand and shape the film as I was going along. And I agree with the reshoot thing. That I've said that after making Nobody Walks, where I was like, I'm going to do it on every movie, even if it means I have less days.
Right.
To reshoot is just so smart, because you can never fully understand what you're making until it's actually kind of put together more. And editing on set as well. I think that's
Editing on
Do you
set is
edit
great.
on set?
I did for Nobody Walks,
Wow,
and,
really?
and I did that because You Won't Miss Me. We were editing while making the movie, so it was like the next closest thing. And yeah, and you can come, because we could potentially reshoot some stuff.
On the end, when would you
Sort
watch
of.
it though? Like at the end of the day? You'd see-
Yeah, at the end. Well, whenever I could. Sometimes it would be on set. Okay, this setup's going to take 45 minutes. We had them like literally, and I'd run up and I'd say, "How did that cut together? Can you just show me that little moment that I'm worried about? Was that, do we need an over the shoulder or whatever it is?"
Well, what did you shoot on?
We shot on 16 millimeter.
Oh wow.
So sometimes it was the day before, but sometimes we'd spread scenes out, like from, we'd shoot part of it one day, part of it the other day, and we
But
shot
did you
in-
have like a video tab or something that you were capturing the video that you could edit on set?
Well, it wasn't. It was like we'd usually be editing the footage from the day before, but we got the dailies turned around as quickly as possible so that he could be. And we did have a lot of the movie did take place in one location, so that
you
helped a
gotta
lot.
go back.
Yeah.
We were like 3
Music
weeks in a
room,
house
right.
and 1 week out. Yeah, so we
Right.
could.
Well, with Simon, we were shooting on the Alexa, which was ideal because when you shoot ProRes to the cards, you just put that thing in the computer and dump it, and then find the sync and you sync it, and it's ready. There's no conversion or anything. So, what was interesting about that process was because we had edited shot Afterschool and Martha on film, so there was always like a delay to when we could actually edit it. But with this, it was like so immediate, and so I would get off set and I'd like talk to one of my co-editors and just be like, "What do you think? Is it working?" And I'd watch the takes, and we'd see right away where it wasn't working. And it really, what was great about it was that that was the closest thing I ever had to sort of being able to reshoot things because it was so fast. But it also made me realize this sort of other part of being a director, which is your job is to always just bring the best out of people. And there were some times where I'd be frustrated with a performance, and I realized it was like, I have to not force this person to get the performance right, but I have to sculpt the role and the lines and everything to play up to this person's strengths. Like, your job is to make them look better and to
How do
be
you do
better.
it though?
You just sort of, there's going to be something that's like, whether it's a language barrier in this case, or whether it's like a certain amount of dialogue that you can give where it'll, as you don't want to push it too far. Those kind of things, very, very small things. Or they're better when they're working from this angle or from this angle, or, there's certain things that you just sort of, you make adjustments to help that person shine better.
Do you guys have any tricks when dealing with actors to get what you want, or have you ever had any situation where they just aren't getting what you want, and how do you get through that?
Well, good communication with them about it.
Up front?
I think that, like, I don't know, I almost want to hear, you're an actor too, and even you are more than me, so you would probably be better to talk about it. But like, for me, like, I'm always like, oh, you need to feel okay that we'll sit here until you do it right. Like, I feel like that's like the one thing that I'm like, I can sense when a performance isn't
Right.
going right, is that
The
it's
pressure
like
of
the pressure of the movie making, which
Holding
is
it
a
all
dumb
up.
thing for anybody to feel. Like, that's the one thing you can go, like, slow down. So it's like being like, we'll just get it. Don't
Right.
worry. Like, figuring that out. I don't know. Is my
And to put the pressure not on only them, but on you. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not just, don't freak out. Don't think that it's about all of us trying to get it right. So it's not just one, not all this
Yeah,
sort of, like,
right.
pressure
It's
on
not like
one.
you-
Yeah,
you have
it's like
to do
you're
it.
screwing this up. It's more just trying to figure out how to make it right.
Or how I'm screwing it up.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
often
Why-
it's
what am
what am I doing wrong
for you that I
that this
Why am I
person
giving
can't?
you
Yeah,
bad
that we
direction?
right.
Yeah.
What do you think of like Fincher?
Altman had a great. Actually, Altman said something because I met him once and I asked him, "What do you do if your actor's not giving you the performance you want?" And he gave me like the best, just the most practical advice, which you wouldn't expect from this. I'd imagine something deeper, but he just said, "Well, you better have somebody better to cut to," and that was the most practical advice ever. So just have another actor there. Whoever else is in the scene, just hope they're better than them. And you can cut away to them.
That's good.
But also just telling people reminding them to like listen to what the words are, and I mean it's different when you're improvising the whole movie, but it's like, I mean like remember just like listen to each other, like actually pretend that you're that person. Like it's real simple, and that usually gets some it dislodges something. I feel like.
I agree. I feel like a lot of like misinflected performances are people just not fully fundamentally understanding what's going on in the scene. And or projecting a false understanding. And I think if you can communicate in a very succinct way, I think if you talk too much, you can very quickly get in trouble. But if you can very succinctly, concisely tell them, this is the elementary idea of the scene, or the elementary motivation for what you need to accomplish in the scene, that's, I think, in my experience, what works best. Yeah. But some people just you can't get through to them, or they're just really anchored in their own convictions on what the scene needs to be, and you're just stuck. And maybe you have someone to cut to. I don't know.
But I also the other thing I found that helps is actually finding something physical for someone to do.
Yeah.
Like if someone's not getting it, it's almost like just give them you know what, before you come into the scene, here's an orange. That's always works. Here's an orange. Unpeel this orange. How would you eat this apple, or how would you cut this apple up? Like you give them something else to do. Yeah. That then allows them to sort of split, to distract them, and also I always think that having an actor performer do something in a scene says so much about a character.
How do you feel about like Fincher doing like 90 takes? Is that, I mean, has any of you ever been on a set where they do anywhere near that many?
Yeah, I've worked for other directors as a production manager and stuff that would do that on purpose, even if they felt like they had it, in order to like, that whole, like, you're breaking down the wall. I think it's a little disrespectful to the actors, honestly. I personally do. I think it's a little like bougie and like fancy of a director, like trying to kind of assert I just feel like it's like trying to assert how much like you're in charge, and
like a power kind of thing.
Yeah, that just seems lame to me. Right. But I totally, there is something about being tired that makes you just kind of like listen and do the scene.
I've actually seen that happen on a commercial set. Or commercials, they do so many takes, it's crazy. And it was line reading, like animated characters was the commercial, and it was the voice actors. And they did like 120 takes. And I watched what happened. And the actor came out full of energy, like did a bunch of takes, then more takes, then they started getting frustrated, and then like super annoyed, and then they were just like broken down to like jelly. And this was like take 40. They still had like another like 80 to go. And then you see they just kind of like are just doing it, you know what I mean? And there's no
that certainly
at all.
happens, but then like if an actor has any training or anything, it's like a pretty like it's a big diss on the
But also it's
if like a director told me like I'm gonna break your spirit so you can crush this Listerine commercial, I'd be like, Jesus Christ, I'm in a low place.
And there's also
a little credit.
But sometimes it's like I mean, for you to think that the only way that there can be a good performance to get out of this person is if you break them down to the point of like where it's like the assumption that you as a director is never going to be wrong. That's just
right.
It's like that maybe they were right the first 3 takes. Like I always find that like there's sometimes I love looking at takes and being like, you know what, I was right, because by take 8 we got better than we were at take 2. And then there's other times where it's like, shit, I just wasted a fucking day on 8 or 10 more takes when he had it in the first 2 takes.
What would you say that the biggest thing, the most important thing that you learned after your first film going into your next film?
I think it's to not control everything, actually, to kind of let go at a certain point.
Get out of the
Because I
way.
was so organized and uptight about everything, and just so, control, to get out of the way, exactly.
And let your collaborators kind of do what they do. And that's why you hired them.
Yeah, and to not feel like every moment has to be exactly perfect. Sometimes being a little bit more open and free is a really good thing. Not knowing what's going on. You don't always have to know exactly what's happening.
And also just you remind yourself, okay, there's another day tomorrow. Like, it's gonna be okay. Like, we're going to 5 a.m. We're gonna figure it. You don't get all so neurotic and anxious about everything. It's just like, no, it's okay. Like, okay, we're on take 20. Like, we'll figure it out. It's fine. Or like, let's take a break. Like, there's a certain kind of, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at that yet and being totally zen, but there is just something like, over the years, I feel like I've just tried to like slow down the process for myself, and also I talk a lot less than I did when I first started making movies. I used to talk a lot more. I like want to go into everything and over-explain to the actors, or try to explain things to the actors. And the more you work, the more you realize, no, just like you said, it's like concise, succinct direction. That's what works.
How about you, Alex?
Well, I mean, I'm sort of echoing a lot of what they felt as well. Like I was so nervous and so scared. I also didn't go to film school. I didn't do any short films. I just sort of launched into it. So there's a lot of sort of fear of the unknown and a lot of novelty. But yeah, like, tomorrow's, like, you don't have leukemia. This isn't that big of a problem. Like, you're not going to court. Like, it's not a real life problem. It's just like your little creative corner that you put yourself in for a few hours, and you'll get through it. And tomorrow there'll be another one, and you'll get through it. So just get a little bit of perspective and don't take it quite as seriously. But I took it so seriously, to the point that it was paralyzing and compromised the quality of the work.
Craig, did you learn any?
All of that sounds really good. I guess the only other one that I definitely was conscious of. I watched my first movie now, and I'm like, man. And this kind of goes to what we were talking about before we started taping this, about like the length of movies. It's like I watched my first movie and be like, I could cut that. I could cut that out. I could cut that thing out.
Right.
And like, it was just that thing of like, it's okay to like, not everything is like super, some of it's just ideas that you're trying out, and like, at the end of the day, like, you might not need it, and it's like hopefully you make an hour-and-a-half movie instead of a 3-hour movie, like all of them are.
Well, the more you make movies, the more you just like on set and you go, there's where you're like shooting, you're like, you don't want to stop it, but you're like, we're not going to use this.
Yeah, that's
we're gonna finish. We'll finish shooting this. We'll get 2 more takes, make everybody feel like their job wasn't their day wasn't wasted. But we're not going to use this. And it's almost actually what I found is actually sometimes you shoot a lot more than you. If you know you're shooting more than you're going to actually need. The nice thing is you're letting the actors be in that world and those roles for a little longer, which ultimately helps. So it's not a huge waste of time. But when you know you're not going to use something, you can stop shooting after a few takes and just keep moving on. But that only comes when you've edited and you can really understand what you're gonna need to finish the story, to tell the story.
But I've also had the opposite sometimes. Like, I thought, there's no way I'm going to use. Like, I'll let a take run after, the lines have ended and an actor's just in the space, and I'm like, I'll just let it go, and but I'll probably never use that. And then I'm like, thank God for that moment. I needed that moment without dialogue. I needed that closure, and maybe it goes somewhere else in the movie, but that's like the gem of. I wish that I always knew what was in or what was out, but I get surprised a lot of the time by what I'm looking for. Or like, that insert that I shot for this other scene.
Do you try to just like, when I'm on, I remember that exact feeling of being like, we don't need this anymore because that's not what we're doing, and then just being like, you know what, we should shoot it the way that it was like some older version of me thought that this was a good idea, that maybe I just don't get it right now, and like maybe later I will like that older version of me more than what I'm doing right now. Like, so that's always a tricky balance of like, how much are you listening to like your gut, and how much is your gut maybe wrong, because you could be wrong, on set anyway.
I've noticed the moments after cut, because I edit, and the moments after cut are usually, I've stolen so many little reaction shots, because it's such a natural moment where all of a sudden you know, you get something, some kind of little thing right after that moment. So compliance. You shot on 16, Super 16?
No, we shot on the Arri D21, which was like the older brother of the Alexa.
Oh, you shot there, D21.
It was cheap, and I wanted 2 cameras the whole time.
Was that a set?
Yeah.
Or it was? Yeah.
Wow, really? That was a set?
It was actually 2 sets that I built. One was his, the caller's house, the caller's bedroom or office, and then like that was downstairs in this warehouse, and then upstairs in the warehouse was the back room of the thing, and we ran the cameras simultaneously, so that the call was actually live on both sides. And I knew I wanted to do that, and it was like the budget was not gonna like let me have 2 Alexas really, but it was gonna let me have 2 of this other camera. So it was like.
So would you, as a director, run up and down? And what about the DP? Like,
Oh, so we had Adam Stone was the DP that was up. I was usually up in the
callers?
in the back room set. And part of why Pat was cast as the caller was partly like I was comfortable with him because I'd worked with him before, and I was like, you're gonna be kind of by yourself a lot more than an actor would probably be cool with. Sorry, you know. And then Scott Gardner, who has like I went to college with him, and he's like shot second, you know, a bunch of stuff. Shot that camera.
How about Red Flag? What shot on the 5Ds?
70s.
70s.
Red Flag was on 70.
And so a lot of the locations that you got, were you just like going in and shooting, or did you get permission, like the jewelry store?
Yeah, the jewelry store. If there's like, you know, cameras up, we have to, like if there's security cameras, we have to ask for permission usually. But in the South, people are pretty lenient.
Right.
And more recently I went to Mexico. You can do anything. But the only place you can't shoot are like banks and police stations. Like you can shoot anywhere else, like airports, restaurants, anywhere. They're very loose. But yeah, we just sort of grill at a lot of places or gently ask. And
He was like, hey, we're shooting this small thing. Is it okay if we...
yeah, and these cameras they're unobtrusive and conspicuous. We had no lights, so we just kind of, these small little cameras. We had wireless microphones, so it wasn't even like a boom situation. So it was pretty inconspicuous.
That's great.
Was it one camera shooting, or did you?
One camera. We had a one-person crew. He also did sound.
Wow.
So he just had headphones. It was very low fun.
He edited it too, or you had
He edited it too, yeah.
Wow. So you had basically like a 3-person crew, including yourself?
2, just me and him.
Just you and him?
Yeah.
And so you had full trust in that he would... Did you like go back and watch playback and stuff after each take? Or?
No, just because we didn't have enough time. I felt like we never had enough time. And also, you know, usually the camera mic wouldn't pick up the audio, so we'd have to... We were doing non-sync sound with these Zoom recorders, so it's not that easy to watch playback. There was no village video production. So that was another reason I never really did playback. These cameras aren't so great for playback too.
Right, how about your first film, right? What kind of formats did you work with on that?
Oh, are you talking about You Won't Miss Me?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I was talking about Orphans. You Won't Miss Me was Super 8, Super 16, 8 flip camera, HD, and like regular, you know, video.
And how was editing that film? Was that fun or?
It was great. I mean, it was great because we did edit while we shot, and I really loved the things that the different kind of formats brought to the film, because each format had its own kind of emotionality to it and texture, and kind of changed the way that we also were shooting it. You know, like you can really take a Super 8 camera anywhere in New York City and no one really cares, and everyone's like, oh, look at that, that's cute. You know, it's just. So, and the flip camera you can take anywhere, and you can use it in places with security cameras and have it be like a hidden camera, or you can make it look like a real movie with a, you know, HVX with an adapter, and put the 35mm adapters on it and get depth and have it look like a movie. And so we kind of played with all those different modes of making movies.
Finally, how much thought do you guys put into the design of your films, to the frame, composition? Afterschool seemed like it was very much thought out, each and every scene pretty much.
Well, what I tend to do, especially with Afterschool, was that there was a certain kind of character. I think about the character of the camera, and if there's in an Afterschool there was a surveillance quality to everything, and so some of it would be finding the shot the master, because most of the stuff played out in the master, is like finding the shot and then letting the act and finding the really nice composition, and then letting the actors kind of dirty it up a bit, not telling them where the marks were exactly, and letting them be on the edge of frame or just off frame, and that kind of thing would make it more interesting. So it'd be finding the composition the way it would look perfect, and then sort of letting the actors make it more interesting. And then and also just always think, I mean, if you know, the camera is another way of telling the story. It's like, there's just, so yeah, I do think about that.
It reminded me a lot of the framing of Cachet, the Haneke films, and a lot of it also I felt was from sort of a surveillance point of view. And that was sort of an aesthetic choice because he's being haunted by these surveillance scenes. You have a lot of these wide shots. And Afterschool had a lot of these wide shots. And there's like a little push in a lot of them too. Was that digital or was that?
No, it was like there was a change in the aesthetic of the camera after the girls die. So the camera starts moving slowly, and then there's a certain gentleness that comes in and then goes away again.
Did you do the movement in production, or did you do
most of it was in production? Yeah. We used zoom lenses, a lot of zooms, and we had dolly and track. But yeah, there was, and then on the digital side, digitally, whenever he was shooting, whatever that was, then that could be whatever. Like that was almost like Jody and I were really always focused about how do we make this look like crap, but really beautiful crap, you know? Like how does it, the high school student who has some sort of vision but they haven't figured it out yet, like just, it was this really interesting process of trying to make it look good but make it look like shit.